We're recording. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Frank McNeil, and I am pleased to have with
Good.
me Dr. Charles Cowell, a good friend of mine. We've known each other for about 40 years now, and we met while we were both working for Senate President Phil Rock many years ago, and our interests merged because we both like to fight for underprivileged people and for people who are marginalized by the system. So, Dr. Cowell, Charlie, as I call you, how are you this evening? Can you hear me, Charlie?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, how are you this evening?
Sometimes the signal gets broken a little bit, but it's still you have that great voice.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do a little editing, but we'll get it. So, you doing okay?
I'm doing fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So, I was just
Good.
giving an introduction on when we met many years ago, and the fact that we both have the same interests of helping underprivileged and marginalized people.
Absolutely.
So we want to talk tonight about the current situation with mushroom workers out in the state of Washington. And Charlie, you want to give a little background on the mushroom workers in the state of Washington?
Yes. The state of Washington is one of the few states that has a law allowing agricultural workers to bring their plight to the state government if there are labor abuses. And in a mushroom farm called Sunnyside Farms, in an area of the Yakima Valley in Washington State, the workers made an appeal to the state government, and Sunnyside Farms was found guilty of labor abuses. So this is a matter of law, and they were fined, I think, $3 million, which for their abuses. Instead of what happened is the workers decided that they really do have rights, and they can pursue their just right, which is to bargain and to choose the United Farm Workers as their bargaining agent. And as soon as that became clear, Sunnyside sold out the entire operation to a company called Instar, a $1 billion asset management company in Toronto, Canada. Now, Instar has got all their investment money from people like, much of it from people like you and me, in retirement funds. For example, the Municipal Retirement Fund of Texas invested $50 million in Instar.
Wow.
And the as Frank and you and I know, all states retired employees, the Good Hands people,
Wow.
they invested $5 million in Allstate. Now, Allstate and these other employment groups, they're dedicated to justice and to integrity. Well, they don't even know where these investments are, nor do they know the plight of the workers. So when Instar took over, to be honest, they were like the Simon Legree of slavery days. An example, they would assign people that were UFW sympathizers. They would give them a quota, maybe 50 times above the regular quota, and then put them in a room or a cave or where they do the harvesting, but none of the mushrooms were ready for harvest. And then when they'd come out that they couldn't make their quota, they blamed them.
Right.
And then they'd give them false labels to put on the boxes, and then they come out and they say, you put boxes that are destined to companies that we're not sending these mushrooms to, and we're writing you up. And they would even bring supervisors in, and they would tell the supervisor, you're doing well, your crew is doing better than others, but you're not a good supervisor. You won't yell at the people. He says, these are my friends. They work hard because I asked them to. No, that's not your job. Your job is to yell at them, scream at them. And finally, after this woman, Linda Chavez was her name, was brought in and told, you're going to be fired because you do not, follow our orders or our commands. And they gave her a warning, and she was 1 minute late or something like that. And they said, well, you're a minute late. And she got fired. So it's really, it's terrible conditions. And, and we want to do something about it. So we have put together, you, Frank, myself, and a lot of civil rights and religious leaders, especially from the Midwest. We have put together the Solidarity Family in support of the Washington State mushroom workers. And we are asking, demanding, telling Instar and Windmill Farms in Yakima Valley, I call it the Valley of Tears in Washington State, to negotiate with Teresa Romero, the president of the United Farm Workers, and to provide rights, respect, and dignity to the workers in these mushroom farms that are owned by Instar and with the name of Windmill Farms. And the UFW farm workers themselves took a ride from Yakima Valley, the Valley of Tears, to the Bakersfield Convention of National Convention of United Farm Workers in September, and told about their plight, and the entire convention voted for the United Farm Workers in the great history of Cesar Chavez and the great history of Dolores Huerta and Richard Chavez and all these other wonderful people to have their first national boycott in 20 years and to boycott the mushrooms from Windmill Farms. And they're asking us to reach out to our friends in the civil rights movement, in the churches, and in the labor unions throughout the country, and ask our friends and the people that remember the beauty of the boycott to get behind these workers and first and foremost, get the Washington people to boycott Windmill Farms mushrooms, because if we can inhibit the growth of this industry on them, they'll really know quickly what's happening. So we should look for Windmill Farms mushrooms in our stores, but if we don't see that name on them, we should also go over our own list of emails, our list of Facebook friends, and ask them if they are from Washington State, they know people in Washington State, they know people in Seattle or in Yakima Valley, and get them behind the boycott, because the boycott has to work mouth to mouth, friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, because we don't have advertising money.
Right. Well, Charlie,
is that a good start?
That's a very good start, and the thing is that solidarity and collective working together, this is only how we're going to get this done, because as you say, we don't have the resources that Windmill Farms or Instar has to fight us off. So we are going to have to use the age-old methods of boycott and standing outside demonstrations to bring attention to Windmill Farms and the abuses of the workers that are going on. And as I did some of the research today looking at this issue, because you and I actually met with some of the workers by Zoom video earlier this year and actually had a chance to talk to some of the workers. And my goodness, you would think we were back in the 60s or 50s, with the things that are going on. And one of the things that I found was really interesting was that they were supplanting sometimes residents of Washington with H-2A visa workers who they could then pay less and work longer hours. So this was one of the plots they were using and to undermine these workers. So it's important. And see, this is not just a Yakima, Washington issue. This is a national issue, because anytime these workers can be abused there, they can be abused anywhere.
You're so right, Frank. And what I really admired, one of the workers we talked to that time was the worker by the name of Linda Chavez, who explained that she tried to explain to her bosses about, how can I yell and scream at people as part of my job? These are good people. These are people that work hard. They deserve their dignity. And they said, well, some of them might not be legal. She said, it's not about who's legal or who's not legal. It's about the right of any worker to be looked at face to face and be able to say, these are the conditions of your work. You can have paid holidays. You can have, paid vacation, because that's what a union brings. And they respect each other. They have solidarity. And but the only thing that the companies are bringing to this is fear and hatred, and trying to divide, trying to threaten. And it's wonderful when you see the workers with their solidarity. You and I remember we led some cheers for the workers.
Yes,
we gave a lot of vivas. Viva los trabajadores en los hongos, and they smiled so, and it really picked them up. And anybody that goes out for a salad, goes out for a steak, which I don't do,
pizza,
but I want those mushrooms on the side, or I'm a veggie and I want to get the vitamin K or whatever it is out of the hongos, the mushrooms. Put a side order of that. Think of what's happening. These people are treated like animals. Frank, remember when we were working together in the early 80s?
Yes.
On the staff of Senate President Rock. And I interviewed 200 farm workers throughout the state of Illinois. And I went to West Chicago, and this is, to be honest, I don't think things are much different in terms of the way mushrooms are harvested. But at that time, there were 3 or 4 beds of mushrooms in an aisle, and maybe 3 or 4 aisles in a Quonset hut. And then it was very, very dark because they grow in manure and in the fungus from the manure. And the workers wear miner's hats, and they crawl on their hands and knees across these beds, and then they go up the ladder and crawl on another one, and they can only cut them when they're ripe and big and perfect for you and me. And I remember riding with Cesar Chavez, and he says, at that time I was a priest, remember? And he said, Father Kyle, he said, you talk to all these different types of workers in Illinois, the apples, the tomatoes, the berries, and so forth. He says, which group struck you as the hardest job? I said, the mushroom workers. And he said, why was that? It was because they were all sick. Because they crawled on their hands and knees, and they had arthritis in all of their joints. they were breathing that air that I don't want to describe, and they were having lung infections,
mushrooms,
all
and
from mushrooms.
there's a sickness that they
And
develop.
so one of them, I said to them, are they pushing you hard? Is it very difficult? And he said, Father, if we were horses, these people would whip us to death. And I could never forget the way they talked. And then for you and I, when we Zoomed with these workers today, how many years? 40 years later. And they're telling us the same kind of stories. And, and they've fired so many of them already. And these workers are so courageous, and they're the hungriest people in the world that I've met in my life of working with farm workers are farm workers. I went in Onarga, Illinois. They asked me to come to their food pantry that they set up in a United Farm Worker Service Center for a while that they had in Onarga, Illinois. And they said, Father, you know why we want you to come down to this food pantry? It's the middle of winter. We're all so hungry that unless we have somebody watch us pass out fair shares of the food, we're afraid, we cheat each other.
Mm-hmm.
Do you imagine how sad that is? And then these are people that have integrity that only wanted to do things right?
Right.
But they're talking about the hunger that they have. And when I went there, they brought me into one of their little trailers, and they wanted me to have a nice cup of coffee. They went and borrowed a spoon of instant coffee. And then they got some more instant coffee, and there were like three of us sitting at a table. One of them was a little kid, about 7 years old. And we're all drinking a cup of instant coffee. That was it. That was their dinner.
Right.
I mean, it just, why aren't the people that give us the greatest bounty in the world going to bed hungry? Well, and why are we not doing something about it?
And the thing is, again, here we are, 2025, and we still have people working in these kinds of conditions, being dehumanized, being cheated, basically, and it's like there's nothing wrong with this. And then it takes so much to get the state to engage, and then they fight tooth and nail to keep these people from collectively bargaining, that it makes the whole process extremely dangerous. And that's what got the state involved. And that's when they found out about the conditions. And that's when Windmill Farms was fined at $3 million. So it is a real occurrence. And I think people, the more information, and I think information, of course, as you know, is powerful. And we have to get this information out to other people and make them understand that there are still, for lack of a better term, indentured servants working the fields out in Washington, and they are being treated miserably.
Something else that's like the worst thing in the world? There's nothing worse than being totally ignored. There's nothing worse than being shunned. There's nothing worse than being the invisible person in the room. And they have been asking for years, and not just we have people like in our group, Frank, like John Thomas, who was former President General of the United Church of Christ. He was in charge of, helping that church function so well as their president, and that's 10 million people. So here's somebody that has an outreach. And John said, we have to be involved in this because we are their voice. The worst thing that can happen is when people like John, we get all these big names and these good people to send letters to Instar Asset Corporation that a lot of retired employees funds are going into without their knowledge, and they better stop, talk to the people that are investing in to stop doing that. But John said that they need to just recognize that these people are children of God, that you have to sit in a room, look across the table and say, if you work overtime, I think you should get paid for overtime. Do you know that, for example, in farm worker communities like Yakima, the stores, they used to, during harvest, they have to work on weekends. And the only way that they can buy their foods for the weekend is that if they leave work a little early on Friday, like about 4 o'clock instead of 6, they start, they work 12-hour days, is so that they can get to the store before the rush hour,
right,
and buy their provisions for the weekend so their family, can eat. And, they wouldn't let them leave until, it was too late for them to go to the stores. I mean, we've got to stop this, Frank. Frank, you've got outreach, and you're a civil rights legend. And there's so many different places that you are honored in Illinois for taking the stand that you did when you became the first to really use the Voter Rights Act in a state that we all love, but we wonder which side of the Mason-Dixon line it really is at different times. And you won a suit against the state of Illinois that had gerrymandered the ability.
The city
you won 2 suits. Well, I always kind of denigrate a little bit what you have accomplished. And, so you're a legend and you're a voice. And I know that the workers are listening to this, because we're going to get it right out to them after we finish it. And the workers are going to I can hear them right now. They're going, Viva Frank, Viva Frank McNeil. And of course, the power of the boycott that Caesar learned, he learned from Martin Luther King.
Right.
I mean, he never gave a talk about boycott without saying it was Dr. King that proved that it could work in the United States.
And this is
the Montgomery bus boycott, etc. So, and they were great friends, but by a distance. But do you know that Coretta Scott King, when she heard that Caesar was put in jail, she went out to the jail in, I believe it was Arizona, so that they would send a message: don't mess with him. And Coretta went to Delano, California, when he was in the middle of one of his fasts, and it shows the two of them, Caesar emaciated, from fasting for justice, and Coretta holding his hands and singing "Nosotros venceremos, we shall overcome."
Right.
So Caesar was always dedicated to the same friendship and union that you and I have been promoting, which is the union of everybody. The solidarity of the family of God, the solidarity of the human race. And the boycott says, we're asking you to do one thing, and it's not to give money. It's don't give money to crooks. Don't give money to people that hurt other people.
Right.
Take that money back.
Well, that's the only thing some people understand is that.
And that's what a boycott does.
When you take away the resource that they're using to dehumanize people, you got to take the money away, take the ability to do that. And if they lose money, then somebody is going to have to make some changes in their operation, because that's the only thing that they understand. It's as if the bottom line is still profitable, they say we don't need to do anything different. But when the bottom line does not become profitable, they say we have to do something different because we're losing money. And that's the clear objective of a boycott is to change the dynamic and to change the paradigm so that those people who are in charge can make the decisions, because the people who are really doing the yelling and screaming at the workers, they're not making any decisions. It's the people above them that are making the
Right.
decisions, saying you got
Right. That's the secret.
so we've got to get that paradigm changed so that those people get the message
We
that
hold that power. And if we can get everybody in the country to be asking at their supermarkets, listen, we're with the United Farm Workers and we support the boycott of Windmill Farms mushrooms. So I don't want to see those mushrooms in this store ever.
right,
And I'm going to be emailing or I'm going to be calling friends that I have in Washington State, in Seattle, in Yakima Valley,
right,
or in the city of Yakima, and telling them, get going on the boycott. Get in front of the Safeway stores. Get in front of your neighborhood stores and tell them, cut these people off. No money for Windmill Farms.
well, that's a great thing that we need to get working on. But I'm so much interested right now in supporting the workers and letting them know there are people outside of Washington, outside of their group, that believe in them, that support them, and want to see them get a fair shake and a fair dollar for a hard day's work. And right now, there's been some accusations of child labor violations with this organization. So they're doing the entire gamut, and all it's about is profit. And I think that should raise the eyebrows of many people who feel that they stand for workers' rights and human rights. Then they need to help us do something about it.
And one last point, I remember talking to Caesar about, I said, Caesar, how can we ever win the grape boycott? I mean, how are we going to get everybody to stop eating grapes? That was in the 80s.
Yeah.
And Caesar said, well, Charlie, this is how it works. A boycott, you don't have to get 100% of the people. You have to, first of all, stop the growth or the increase in profits. When people just stop getting more people to buy it, not even less, just stop the growth. The first thing that happens is at the stockholders meeting, they say, hey, what happened to the growth projection? This
Mm-hmm.
thing's flat. And they'll fire a CEO. And he says, then if you get a 2% boycott, that's only stopping 2 people out of 100 that are walking into a store and not buying Windmill Farms mushrooms, for example, especially if they live in Oregon, Washington State. Then he says the president of the company gets fired. And if you get 3%, the whole board of directors gets fired. And if you get 4%, they're bankrupt. Why are they bankrupt? Because they get overtaken by competitors. And he gave the example of the fastest boycott they ever had, which was Chiquita Banana.
Yes.
Chiquita Banana lasted 1 week.
I remember that.
Because Chiquita had 46% of the market and Dole had 44%. And when Caesar announced the boycott of Chiquita Banana for abuses in Florida, they had an emergency meeting of their board of directors and they say, if we lose 2 points, we're not going to be the number 1 banana. And because Chiquita was absolutely petrified that they wouldn't be the number 1 banana, they called up Caesar and they said, we'll meet with the workers, and we'll work out a contract that will, protect their rights.
Right.
You know what they get with the union, Frank? And this is a wonderful thing for farm workers. But think about it, really. They have these celebrations when people from their retirement pension fund receive a pension check, and a gross amount of, the pension fund. for example. You know what some of these checks are? $35,000.
Wow.
Or, I mean, how can anybody do? Well, the farm workers, that makes a big difference because they were able to put down payment on a house, and the younger people in the family then take care of the old. Yeah, but I mean, really, for the hard work they're doing, for the food that they're feeding us, and for the little that they're asking for respect, dignity, and a pension, and being able to get a paid Christmas Day off. I mean, they'll be off because everybody closes Christmas. They don't pay them,
Right.
Unless there's a union. We got to get this solidarity family to get big. Caesar got 17 million people in the grape boycott, according to a Harris poll. And we want to get 17 million in one, because that'll send a message to a billionaire asset company. And we've got social media. So you've got to be the one to send the word out.
And Charlie, at this point, it's time for us to conclude for the evening, but I'll be in touch and we'll come back again and we'll talk.
Thank you for inviting me to the Talk of the Town.
All right, Charlie. Take care.
What do you say we end with a big viva for the farm workers in Washington State and for the United Farm Workers? All right? Yes. 1, 2, 3.
Viva!
One,
thank you, Charlie.
Viva!
Viva!
Viva! Viva! Viva! Viva! Thanks, Frank.
All right, thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Frank.